Welcome, welcome, everyone. Um,
Hello.
in super exciting news, y'all are getting two episodes back to back of me and Quinn talking together, which is really exciting. Coming off of last week's episode, you said something so adorable. It was like, I really love the episodes that we do together. The conversation style is so yummy. This is why people do this.
Yes, I think just the back and forth and the different experiences, our experiences are so different. And I think it's beautiful to have that contrast between us. It shows women a a buffet of possibilities.
Mm-hmm. And boy, do we have just like another full buffet for you all in this episode. Coming off of, part one, we sat down today to really digest and figure out what we wanted coming through in part two. And we've got really beautiful things to talk about. Just to kind of set the scene, the episode today, what we found was it was just a lot of discussing what goes down post divorce. And of course, with the lens of, how what you're going through also filters out into your kids, all these different pieces. I mean, we're going to hit on future relationships, on your work, especially for those of us that like maybe stay at home moms or not having work, how that can really change things for you. And the heart and soul of it is going to really be this idea that at its core, divorce is about change. And as humans, we usually don't like change. And we think that divorce is the problem because it brings change. And actually, it's how we frame the change that matters most. The stories we're telling ourselves about it, how we're using that change to give us a different trajectory in the future. So, also, good side note, we have quite a few just phenomenal quotes that are going to be coming from the book For Better or For Worse, Divorce Reconsidered by E. Mavis Hetherington. We've referenced it a lot, so just know that's where we're going to be getting our research from. So with that said, Quinn, will you kick us off with this really fascinating quote?
All right. During the first 2 years after a divorce, a time commonly called, quote, the crisis period, change, often dramatic change, becomes a way of life. Men, women, and children change roles, residencies, economic classes, sexual habits, clothing, hairstyles, personal behavior, and careers. It's a way of life.
That is so true. When you listed off those things, like getting to hear it, obviously we talked about this previously, but getting to hear it again, I was like, oh my God, like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sexual habits, hairstyles,
Mm-hmm.
residency, like where you're living, how you're operating in the world. And it's not just changing for you, it's changing for your ex-husband and it's
Mm-hmm.
changing for your children and even radiating out from that.
Yeah, for the in-laws, the
Grandparents,
friends, there's a lot
cousins.
of change. Yeah.
Yeah. So something we wanted to explore is, in the book they entitle it being a crisis period. And we'll dive into this a little bit deeper, but kind of reframing that instead of in many ways, yes, it can be a crisis period, especially if you do not have a lot of the work that we are so passionate about doing before you make that decision,
Yeah.
creating that foundation in yourself. It really can be like managing crises. But what I'm hoping most from the episode is to help you guys realize this is actually can be like a super quick moving space in your life where you can make big shifts because everybody is kind of fluid at this
Mm-hmm.
moment and the brain's more open to possibility, to new things
Yes.
through the like birth canal of divorce. Like the pressure, the like intensity, the newness. It's a lot, which maybe provides a lot of that crisis feeling, but having that kind of way that your ship is going, knowing where you're headed. But along with that, and we are going to have multiple moments in this episode where we kind of go out into the weeds, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
word, because we found that a lot in this episode, that there's just inevitable complexities that come up in our own personal stories. I wanted to kick us off with this story. As we were talking, I was kind of mentioning to Quinn, feeling like maybe my oldest, he's 14 now, had been a little bit parentified in us getting divorced. And I was sharing this story the other day of how my middle son had worn, apparently, like his pairs of socks like 3 days in a row. So when he got in the car with his dad smelled them and was like, "What's going on?" And proceeded to text me and be like, "Can you please make sure the kids are having clean laundry?" Which, of course,
Mm-hmm.
just hit a trigger point for me. And it ended in when he came over to pick up Cal later, because we have such a kind of open, more friendship kind of co-parenting. He was in the house kind of checking out their room, and he and I were starting to fight. And it was, looking back, I'm like, it was just both of us being like emotionally flashbacked and just going back and forth. But Cal, our oldest, Cal, was right there and just ended up like kind of mediating it somewhat, being like, "Hey, you're not hearing him," or like, "You chill out a little bit. You're getting overworked."
Mm-hmm.
And I could see so clearly how he just saw our escalation, and he could see how our brains weren't hearing each other and we were just speaking past each other. So I was sharing it with Quinn as like, "Oh no, I think my kid has been parentified." And what did you say, Quinn? It was really lovely.
I wondered if it had been in any other situation, like if he had been using those same skills between two friends at school or between two teachers, any other situation, would she still consider him to be parentified? Or is it simply that he was mediating between these two adults in his life and he has the skills because he has watched his mother learn the skills of emotional regulation, and you have worked diligently, especially recently, talking to him about consequences and emotional regulation and building of trust. And so I saw it as him not caretaking his parents, but using the emotional skills that you have shown him as a coach. Because when you talk about how you were parentified as a child, it looks nothing like this. What did it look for you as a child? What did it look like for you as a child being parentified?
Yeah, this was such a beautiful parsing out for us of the labels that we sometimes just throw around and we think of, associating with what children are going to go through post divorce. But I definitely was parentified as a child, and that did not look like me standing in between my parents mediating something for them.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like, without anybody speaking at all, just knowing I needed to behave a certain way, that emotions weren't safe, that I couldn't, I unconsciously knowing I couldn't say that or I couldn't do that. I needed to be a certain way to help my parents stay stable, to get what I needed, to not get in
Mm-hmm.
trouble. So the reason, and I want to tie in here because you brought up this beautiful point that in your family too, with your littlest at school, her like signing up to be a peer mediator, or what was it
Yeah,
called?
a peer counselor. And so if someone was having trouble on the playground, they would send over one of these fifth graders. And she was so excited and telling me that she was going to tell them to think about their thoughts and what feelings were created by their thoughts. And if someone was fighting and said that they hated someone else, she would say, "Well, there was this guy who wrote in his journal," and it's Marcus Aurelius. She didn't know that at the time, but she said, she quoted him where he says, any man that can make me angry is my master. And she said, "And I will ask them, do you really want Julie to be your master?" And here she was in fifth grade learning these skills about being emotionally self sufficient and self regulating in a really healthy, beautiful way.
Yes, yes. And that's like the point that I was noticing was the complexity of seeing the skills that your children develop coming through the divorce and
Mm-hmm.
being careful about how we label them, right? You showing me through the lens, like my brain was thinking because Cal was in that moment showing up as more of the adult than either me or his father, thinking, oh no, that means he's been parentified. And you kind of stopping and being like, or does that just mean he's learned healthy skills of communication and can now be like, hey, y'all, you're really not doing a great job of that.
Yeah.
Which, when we really dropped back to like, what does it really mean to be parentified? That is not what I was doing for my
Right.
parents, right? It would never have been safe to, in a fight where my parents were fighting, to have intervened at all on either person's side.
Yeah.
Like, that would never have been okay. So, I wanted to start off with these because we wanted to start off with these in the outline just to kind of like open up the space, kind of like shaking my shoulders, moving my body, of like taking a deep breath around this idea that I think so many of us have of like, I really don't want to fuck up my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. As if
And
we have a chance of not doing that.
any, yes, this
Mm.
deeper acknowledgement at the very beginning of the episode of like, I don't, yes, we want to stay aware of how we are in our parenting, but I don't really know how helpful it is obsessing about whether or not you fucked up your kids. And like in that moment, instead of focusing on the beauty of that moment, being like, using it as a thing, a way to feel guilt that like, oh, maybe we parentified our child by getting divorced and now he has to mediate for us, which is so silly. Do you see how the brain did that? It's like, this is
Mm-hmm.
exactly what would have been happening potentially if we were still married and fighting all the time. And
Yes. I think if you had stayed married, though, it would be him yelling at you and you yelling at your ex yelling at him. And it would have been
yes,
so different. Whereas in this
so
case,
different.
it was everybody take a breath, dad, let's go.
Yeah, because at the end of that fight, and it actually amazingly, it did not escalate into a full fight. It was like simmering. You could feel the simmer, and
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, he and Cal were leaving. So at the end, it was like we could all kind of laugh. I could also admit, like, I'm sorry. I'm also like not in a space to hear any of your ideas on how I could clean up the children's room more. I have had a hell of a week at work. And and my inner part that's like, I'm not being a good enough mom, is super activated and
Yeah.
cannot take any. And it was so beautiful because it was, I see now, like, it was not criticisms. It really was like, can I help in this way? You're right. Is there's maybe I could get some socks? And I'm like, so yes, it was really beautiful to see. You're right, a dynamic that perhaps if we'd been married would have been very, very different, to see how sometimes my brain post divorce goes, oh no, maybe this is bad because we're divorced. I still catch myself doing that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, right? Oh, maybe this
Yeah.
negatively affected my kid. And to ultimately go, hey, let's all stop thinking post divorce that when stuff comes up, we immediately label it as a problem and link it to, oh, that's probably because we got divorced. And
Yeah.
ultimately, the bigger message of the illusion that so many of us have been given that we can prevent like pain or suffering or growth for our children.
Yes. And when we look forward to the kind of adults we want to raise, we want to have children that are resilient and strong and that they face big problems and they don't cower, but they can turn to us for support. They get new insights, try new things. They have that growth mindset. They overcome. They can face bigger problems in the
Mm-hmm.
future. But the only way that happens is if they have challenges now. And I would rather have them face
Yes.
challenges when I am in the same house as them and can help them through it, or they come home from their
Oof.
dads and they had a challenge and I can help them through it. Like, give them the challenges now so that they can grow up into the young men and young women that can go out into this world and have a successful life.
Yes. And navigate the very real, like, I think the biggest block that I see to forward movement in life is just this fear around needing to protect and shelter and bubble wrap our kids.
Yeah.
And so we don't make big decisions that are actually what's best for us. Like, okay, maybe it is a divorce. We hold back thinking this is going to protect them. And as we've mentioned multiple times in the podcast, we don't even see all the stuff that's happening right here. And this goes into the next section that we wanted to talk about, which was the like, in mentioning in the quote, right, that there's this big opening, lots of change, where so many of us see that as a negative, because if the goal in life is to protect and to keep the same, then big change isn't what you want, right? And really like turning that completely on its head and saying, if where we've come from, if our past, the generations before us have been unhealthy and fucked up, divorce then becomes this incredible opportunity for rapid change that can completely, put the trajectory of your future in a whole different realm.
Yes. Yeah.
That when it's coming from unhealthy is what you want.
Yes, of course. It's like going in for chemo or having a tumor removed. You want huge change. You want no cancer. And for many of us, the marriages that we were in were not made for us. Society and religion and the political forces made the most advantageous system for men and to create consumers. And
yes,
but it was not about how can we help women thrive. In fact, it was probably the opposite. It relied upon the free emotional and physical labor of women in order for this entire structure to even exist. And now that we are opting out, we want big change. We want change where it's good for everybody, that nobody is having to stay in a relationship or a marriage where they're having to sacrifice themselves on the altar of the marriage in order for it to progress. We want everyone to thrive.
Yes. And I see that. Like, that is the wave of evolution that is coming forward, that is being asked for, of like completely seeing a different world where we don't have to have, like you said, this whole group of people that are just losing themselves to keep the machine going. This is making me think of this. We were talking about this ahead of time. This woman that I met yesterday on one of my calls, young, in her early 20s, married, has 2 small kids. And I was shocked. She's probably one of the youngest women I've ever had jump on a call with me. And hearing her tenacity, her like very clear seeing of how much her potential, all the things she had been excited about, right? In her instance, she'd been going to college, had a career path, things like all this forward momentum for her journey. And then she got pregnant dating this guy. And it's like her whole life got derailed into this other story that from her point of view is very like culture society driven, which was, well, you got married, you got pregnant, so now you need to marry him because he's the daddy of your baby. And now that kid needs a sibling, so you need to have another baby so that they can have siblings together. And you need to like leave your career and go follow him, and so that you can live in the little white picket fence, right? And her not too far into this marriage going, oh shit, hold on a second. In the state of like 2 or 3 years, I have completely lost myself, my identity, everything I was excited about. And I am just like a cog in the machine of this other person's life and future.
Yeah.
And what shocked me was how aware she was of that, and how she was like, fuck no. Versus like you and me in our like being brainwashed to the extent that like we just kind of, yeah, that's going to make me happy. That's going to be enough. Not really ever questioning like, maybe I do want a career. Maybe there is more to me than just raising children and supporting this man in his career.
Yeah.
So that moment though, talking to her, as you know, I'm so fucking passionate about the whole humans are evolving at this really fast rate. It drove home for me of like, we need trajectory changes now for this next generation. And those trajectory changes come from us in marriages that are not going to work for this next generation, changing that mold, breaking that mold, and saying, here, now you get to see kind of different ways of doing this, opening their minds to like the old gender rolled, this is how it is, marriage does not have to be the only answer. Because I'll tell you what, I was thinking about my sons. I was like, holy shit, if these are the women of the next generation, may the goddess have mercy on their poor souls. Because the patriarchy is not setting them up well for this next generation of women.
No, it's not. No, it's not. There was a quote going around recently, something about how we've spent decades raising empowered women, but we have failed to prepare our sons to be partners to empowered women. And, you know, I'm dating men who are of a different generation than yours. And I've got to say, they are not prepared. There's something very wrong with them. They're not okay. And I don't know if it was because this was before the laws about concussion, and so they got a few when they were teenagers. But I gotta say, there's something wrong with these men, and they are so unwilling to see it in themselves.
Well, and I would say too, I don't think it's so much a generation, Quinn, because if you think about it, Joe is your age generation.
Okay.
So So it's more an individual. Here's what I see that quote says it so beautifully. We've spent years empowering women because we have been the underdogs. We have been the ones oppressed. And when you are oppressed, you have the momentum to climb, to overcome, to like, I want more. It is a whole different journey when you've been the one on top. This is the whole, when you've been on top, what is it? Mutuality, or, people being equal with you feels like a step down.
Yes. Yes. Equality feels like, what's the word?
Suppression, or you're losing something because now you're not special because everybody's equal with you. So we wanted to highlight that to also just impress once again, like this bigger image of what you are doing in the messy complexity of how your children are going to be, going through lots of changes, seeing themselves differently, taking on different roles. Be very careful labeling it as bad or being hard on yourselves, because we are in this huge flux. And what I'm seeing is those who are just doing the old ways and just playing the old game and reinforcing those old stereotypes, the women of this next generation just are not going to be here for it. And the more that we can in this generation take responsibility for that and change trajectories and try as much as possible. I mean, think about it. Mm-hmm. My boys already have a whole different idea of what women are.
Yeah. And I would expect this woman that you talked to, if her daughter ended up pregnant and unmarried, she will have a different message for her daughter than her parents and society had for her. That she won't say, "Give up your dreams." She would encourage her to have a different choice.
Yes, absolutely. So 2 things that we wanted to touch on that we want you guys to be aware of when we're talking about post-divorce and how it is with children, were just these pieces that they can still happen within marriage for sure.
Yeah.
And I know because of seeing, I think both of these definitely in
Mm-hmm.
my relationship with my parents growing up. But it can be something that post divorce can kind of slip in there too, and that you can think it might be okay and it's really not. And the two things are going to be emotional incest and parental alienation.
Yeah.
So, talk to us, Quinn, about what emotional incest is.
For example, it's when you, as a divorced woman, take on one of your children, and sometimes it is your oldest son. It could be any child, actually, that you take as your emotional partner, and you confide in them the way that you would a an intimate partner, but about your emotional challenges with your ex. And then with the parental alienation, it kind of segues in with it. And most of us, we come out of divorce with um, parts of our paperwork, our divorce decree saying, don't say anything bad about the ex. But many parents have a very, very hard time doing that and being able to either stay neutral or to be positive about the relationship of the with the other parent, but to absolutely there's no place for you to attack the other parent in the eyes of your child. Your child, no matter where they are in their relationship with the other parent, has the right to be able to have their own experience with that parent. And even if the other parent is speaking badly about you, that still does not give you permission to try and undermine the relationship with that parent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if you're open to it, Quinn, I think you have some really like, I have my own story that I want to use to illustrate kind of what these two things look like from my childhood, because I actually definitely had
Mm-hmm.
this happening with my parents. But I also really want to take, before we dive into that piece, I just wanted to like, in your instance particularly, I have watched you really wrestle with this parental alienation piece. And I want to give like a nuanced approach to this through your journey, which was, in your case, your children have experienced abuse with their dad post divorce. And that when I was coaching you, I noticed a lot of your brain feeling this like, well, you still need to have a relationship with your dad, and he's still your dad,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to almost, I think, instead of being neutral in the parental alienation, maybe leaning a little bit this,
Yeah.
this way of trying to be like, your dad's, you never said like your dad's not that bad, but like you need to have a relationship with him, right? Trying to facilitate a
Yeah.
relationship with him.
Yeah.
And coming to more of a space of realizing what your kids maybe needed most was you just being like, I hear you. Yeah. So the point I was wanting to make was that sometimes, once again, like that intensity that we feel of like not wanting, like I was at the beginning, right? Being so afraid of over parentifying Cal because I know, right? Oldest son, I have my own thoughts around, ooh, I want to be really careful I don't do this. And just watching for how, in your instance, it actually was letting them in some ways alienate themselves from their dad because that's their right to
Yeah.
be like, I don't want to have a relationship with my dad. He's abusive. I don't like him.
Yes.
And you doing so good at learning how to just hold space for that without like diving into it with them, right? It's not like it became a
Yeah.
huge ex partner hate fest, but still letting them have their experience. Does
Yeah.
that?
And it's been consistent. Like every child that he has been physically abusive with, they no longer have any contact with him. And the two that he does still have contact with, he hasn't been physically abusive. And they were with him this weekend and allowing them, those that want a relationship, to pursue that,
Yes.
and protecting those that don't want to, not pushing them to have it, just allowing it to be whatever it is without my
Mm,
interference or trying to spin it in a positive or a negative way.
yeah. Now, I want to use the example I think this is just a incredible example from my own childhood to give, like, if people are like, what are we talking about here? Right. This would be a good example. So I remember in high school, my mom once like bringing me home from some activity. It was she and I in the car, and she ends up breaking down and ends up telling me, I caught your dad looking at porn.
Oh, shit.
Per- Perfect example of like emotional incest and parental alienation
Yeah.
completely tied in together. She is sharing something that is not appropriate to
Mm-hmm.
be. That's the emotional incest. She is
Yeah.
making me privy to information that and she's emotionally processing her stuff. No, that's like, go fucking get a therapist. That's who you
Yeah.
talk about that to. You
Yeah.
do not talk about it to your oldest child.
Yeah.
Tied in with the now I have this parental alienation towards my dad because,
Yeah.
oh my God, he's doing this thing that's hurting my mom. Like, beautiful example of what it's like
Yeah.
when these two things are playing. And to just, that's the emotional incest piece of like, do not be sharing and processing things with your kids that ultimately are of a nature that like needs to be with a best friend or a therapist. I am very
Yeah.
open with my kids about my CPTSD and when I'm experiencing things, but not in a like, hey, let me talk this through with y'all. Can you help me figure this out? It's like a,
Yeah.
I'm in an emotional flashback. I'm going to go step away for a moment.
I'm gonna call Quinn. She's gonna help me through this. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And same thing, you know, when we tie that into the parental alienation, just realizing it's when you're sharing stuff about that other parent that you are sharing in the hopes that they will like you more than the other parent, or that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it just makes that messy triangulation in the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that was another section that we just really wanted to highlight when we were thinking in the big frame of like post divorce. Here's what you want to be aware of and thinking about when it comes to your kids. Now we want to go into this really interesting period of time that we heard in the book, and we kind of want to highlight it and bring it to the forefront of your focus when you're thinking about right before, you know, considering divorce, through divorce, and then afterwards. Will you read that quote for us, Quinn?
Yeah. For most people, the end of the first year, not the second year, was the most painful period of the divorce cycle. After the initial euphoria of being free and hopes for greater happiness, doubts about the past and concerns about the future increased over the first year. But in the second year, there was an upsurge in emotional well-being as people began to adapt to their new life situation. And I did not find that to be true. That's why it was so interesting to me. I was euphoric kind of right out of the gate. Well, that's not true. For about 6 months, it was really, really challenging as I was gaining my footing and my ex got remarried and helping my kids figure out how they were going to interact with this new woman in their life and her children. So there were those kinds of constructs. But in general, I feel like my life has just gotten better and better and better. And yet
Mm-hmm.
I have girlfriends who are also divorced, and I haven't seen the same trajectory for them.
Yeah.
And I've wondered why, and it's why I do the work I do with post-divorce glow up, because I feel like my life exploded in really positive ways, where there
Mm-hmm.
are a lot of women who feel like they need to pull in and they've got to quote unquote heal before they start making their life bigger and better. Whereas I see this beautiful opening in these first couple of years that we talked about, that the soil has been rototilled. We've thrown a
Yes.
lot of shit in there, so it's all fertilized. It's like we can grow anything we want. So let's be intentional about what we grow. What
Mm.
was your experience the first couple of years?
Well, I just loved listening to you talk about that, Quinn, because what I realized is like, No, I love those words, like euphoric healing. That is what you and I went through. Like our couple years post divorce, because healing is hard. Like there was a lot, it was hard, euphoric healing
Yeah.
because it was so many gorgeous highs. Of course, there were lows because that's the
Mm-hmm.
healing part. But I definitely don't feel like we got what could happen. And we wanted to highlight this for a lot of women, which is you think the divorce is going to be the answer. Like, this is the fairy tale ending. Now we all just ride
Mm-hmm.
off into the sunset. And you can have built so much momentum leading up to that moment that it can feel, if you think that's going to be the end all be all like magic pill that now fixes everything,
Mm-hmm.
that can be a huge letdown when you get divorced and you realize, oh, I'm still me.
Yes, the
Life.
miserable brain that I had in my marriage is with me, and now I'm just in a different living situation. You bring your brain with you.
Yes. And that's why, we talk about, like, I think why we are different in this way from a lot of other women that we've met is because we were going through the like considering divorce process with so much self-work
Yes.
and building a lot of momentum towards like this change is going to be a launching point,
Yes.
which she talks about in the book, for better or worse. Like, the women that thrive are the ones who use this divorce intentionally as a, like, I remember telling myself, like, things will never be the same, in a
Mm.
good way, not in a negative way, but like, I will have, God damn it, I will have the life I want. Like, I will do whatever it takes for however long it takes. I'm in it. And the feeling of like the euphoria of taking back my freedom to be in charge of my life,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. And we talked about how when you get divorced, it's like this new birth. And when a child is being created, within a womb, there's all of these stem cells that have to differentiate. Some will become bone, some will become brain. And there's just this intelligence that decides what's going to be what. And in a post divorce life, it's like being handed this bucket of stem cells for your life, and you get to make these decisions. Am I going to
Yeah.
pursue this relationship? Am I going to pursue this career? Where am I going to live? There's so many opportunities to start making decisions that feel congruent for you. And there's really no
Yes.
right or wrong in a there just really is no right or wrong. Maybe there's some really wrong, but I think that most of us, we can't mess this up other than
Yeah.
simply not taking action.
Yes. And we talked about too that, like, that's what I said, of like, the thing that limits our growth the most is this fear and just wanting to protect. Like, we just have to close down and get really small. It's that like freeze response that
Mm-hmm.
so many of us have. And we had mentioned that, like, one of the most protective things for your kids, right, in this instance of this, you know, we know we're going to go through a big change.
Mm-hmm.
They call it a crisis period for a lot of people, these 2 years post divorce. And it can be if you are resisting the change the whole time, if you are just focused on what was and what is no longer. And not that grieving's absolutely the other half of that coin, but you have to
Yeah.
also be putting in this momentum of the heart of this episode, which is change is hard for both adults and children. That it is, but that doesn't make it bad
Exactly.
just because it's hard.
Yes. And when you can sit with your children in them being upset about changing schools or different friends or step parents. And you can sit with them and say, yeah, this is hard and let's feel it. Like, I'm here for it. The only way through is through. And when you have managed your mind to know that you don't have to like it all to accept it all and to let it just flow through you
Flow through.
and to be that mom that allows everyone their own emotions, the anger, the upset,
Yeah.
the whatever. It's such a beautiful thing to be able, I mean, the intimacy and authenticity of your relationship with your children, it just blossoms.
Yes. And the key to that is really watching your inner critic and
Mm-hmm.
those when you have those horrible thoughts, which will come up post divorce,
Yeah.
that just kind of pop in of like you're going through something bad or your kid's going through a rough spot and you're like, this is all my fault. This is because of the divorce. They would have been happier if I'd stayed married. It's like this mechanism in the brain to like avoid the pain of the now. It goes to like some kind of like, oh, I'll feel release if I just go obsess about how if I'd just done something different, it wouldn't be this way.
I know. Isn't that weird?
It
Yeah.
is. It's so weird. And instead, it's going woo, whoosh, 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 whoosh. Like, no, we're not going to go escape and torture ourselves with regret. Sometimes it's like it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to feel regret than to just be with what's in front of you. And instead, developing the muscles. I would say that's the biggest muscle I developed in the 2 years post divorce was like how to just be with the complexity of life, that it's not all a fairy tale and we're not all always going to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And um that doesn't, I don't think we necessarily have that naturally. We definitely haven't been taught it by our culture, our parents, but this is the period where you get to be dropping into that more and more. And you do kind of have more time, I would say more time and space to do that because you've just gotten out of the marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of
Yeah.
time and space, let's talk about our co-parents. Because we have two
Yes.
very different co-parents. When I was going through the divorce, I honestly believed that he would be very, very involved in our children's lives. And I tried to give him, equal time, except for that I lived in a city where my children would be going to school and he lived about 45 minutes away. We wrote it into our decree that we would celebrate birthdays together. And he asked me about how are we going to do holidays? It'll be so sad. And I'm like, we can just celebrate them together. I expected that he would get remarried, but I felt like this will be no problem. We'll go on vacations together. I'll just have a
Yep.
separate place. I mean, this is going to be so great. One big happy fucking family.
Happy fifth. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And what happened instead is he lives out of state. I have my children most of the time. I will find out just days before he shows up. He'll send me a text asking if he can see the kids, which I'm always happy to allow the kids that want to have time with him to
Want to
have
see him.
time with him. We tried the birthday celebration together once. It was a shit show.
It was. It
It
was.
was terrible. We have never
Yeah, that was a no.
vacationed. He doesn't follow the court orders. I've had to go back to
No.
court to get him to follow the parenting plan that he and I created together. So the parent that I thought would be there is not the co-parent that I have. What
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah, so mine is kind of the opposite trajectory. When I came out of my marriage, I was coming from a marriage where we had played very strict gender roles of like him working all the time and me being a stay-at-home mom. And so I really thought there is no way he is going to be able to handle this. I think at the time he'd never had like an overnight with our kids without like me or his mother being with him. So I was like, there's going to be a nanny within like 2 months. and I actually fought in my divorce to make sure that like if he couldn't watch the kids, that he wouldn't just be always giving them to a nanny. That's how much I thought like there's no way this, and I have been blown away. My ex-husband really, in so many ways, my trajectory in my divorce, post-divorce, has really seen him become so much more of an involved dad, just really stepping up in a lot of ways. And it's actually, I would say increased over the years even. And, you know, I think I always, as you knew from the beginning, like I hoped we would be able to stay friends, but I came out of the divorce needing like a lot of very firm boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was just beautifully messy, as Quinn knows. Like my ex-husband and I had probably 3 to 4 moments for various periods of time where we reconnected. I mean, we live 3 minutes away from each other. We have no other family out here. So in many ways, we were still we needed to depend on each other. And I think so much of it for me was just having to be flexible to just like that. Like you think it's going to go one way, that your co-parenting is going to be a certain way. And then you realize like it's not. And we talked about how this can be a real blind spot. Like in my instance, because I've grounded so much into my own journey and this is great. My kids have a dad that's stepping up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need this time and the space to go discover myself and have time to lean into me. You mentioned, though, that you have not seen that in everybody when a spouse steps up post
Yeah.
divorce.
I have several clients who are angry that their spouse, who was very much an absentee father when they were married, is now stepping up and is this great dad. And they felt like one of the reasons they wanted out of the marriage is because everything was on them. And so now that they're divorced and creating this new life, dad is showing up and taking the kids, being a great dad, and it really challenges their narrative of their victimization. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons why I really encourage us to hold our stories lightly. The stories about our
Yes.
exes, the stories about ourselves, because we do not see the past as it is. We see the past as we are. So when we look to the past, if we're in a really good empowered place, we usually see, oh, everything had to happen this way. But when we are feeling like the victim, there's just so much blame and anger to hand out over our
Yes.
past. So if we can just hold
Yes.
it more lightly and remember whose side we're on. When we're dealing with our kids, we're on our kids' side. So if
Yes.
dad can step up, great. If dad can find a healthy new partner, great. If he decides to have another child and it's a good situation, great. Like we are cheering for whatever's great for everyone involved. But sometimes that
Yeah.
does mean letting go of our preconceived notions about who this person is and giving them the grace to
Yes.
grow.
Yes. And that is so huge because it's understanding that story. I definitely used a story of victimhood, villain, victim to get out of my marriage. That was
Mhm.
crucial.
Yeah.
I had to use a lot of seeing him through the framework of narcissism and really noticing those behaviors and accentuating those behaviors to
Mhm.
have enough in me to really make that leap. You were so good coaching me post divorce, though, with helping me like back off of that story because it got to a point where I didn't like that wasn't helping me anymore in the co
Mhm.
parenting sphere to keep thinking of him in these ways. It was just creating a lot of, we talk the like embittered kind of resentful feelings, and what was needed was like moving into a space of working together, figuring out things for both him and me, because as you
Yes.
mentioned, I now have a relationship with my co-parent where I can say, I want to go. Earlier this year, I was like, I really want to go to the burn. I didn't end up
Mm-hmm.
going, but we had worked out like him keeping the kids for a good 3 weeks so that I could go do that. Like,
Yeah.
and that came out of letting go of the story of him being evil, which in order to do that, and this is a complicated process, so don't rush yourselves on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go pick like, oh, I'm not going to think of him as evil. I let life show me where the next step was. And that was a lot of me also having to acknowledge my own codependent behaviors that had also played into that dynamic in our
Mm-hmm.
marriage, and letting both of us, it helps that I have an ex-husband who is really interested in growth and awareness and trying to heal and be better in those ways.
Yeah.
Letting him, like you said, have his own growth too in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. So as we think
Yeah.
about growth, I want to do this other quote about the window of
Yes.
change.
I'm so excited for this part.
Yes. The window of change, which usually is most wide open in the first few years after divorce, although the window is never entirely closed, if no steps toward positive change are taken in the early years, they are less likely to be made later. And sometimes the newly divorced are more preoccupied with immediate stresses than with long-term, big-picture thinking. Just getting to tomorrow is hard enough. Nevertheless, every time a divorced person makes a choice about how to earn a living, about where to live, who to live with, about what kind of daycare center or school to send her child to, about when to start dating and who to sleep with and how often to sleep with them, she is making a choice about the window of change and whether or not to embrace it. And as these choices mount, they begin to fold into one another until they form a pattern, a pathway. Without realizing it, the individual is on the road to becoming defeated or enhanced or good enough. It's so important to
Oh,
realize that even making a choice to do nothing is still a
is a choice.
choice. It is a choice.
Yes. Oh my God. As you were reading that, it was like waves of seeing you and me and our journeys and being like, fuck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We leaned in so aggressively to really being like, this is not going to happen by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And that future focus of like, I see the life I want and that's where we're headed, instead of the just like minute to minute kind of surviving. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that's the case, especially for me, because I came out of my divorce able to, with that greater perspective, right, take the resources I had and go, you know what I'm going to spend this money on? I'm going to go become a coach, because that's what fucking lights me up,
Mm-hmm.
and I see how much it's helped me. I'm going to go do it myself. And oh, not only am I going to become a coach, I'm going to go start my own business. That is like I'm appreciating that was such a send of betting
Mm-hmm.
on myself,
Yes.
instead of where's another man, or even going and working for a company at the time, right, that can take care of me.
Yeah. And some
With
of that healing didn't look like doing. I'm thinking of the number of times where you were working really hard or very stressed out, and the work for you was to slow down. It was to feel,
mm-hmm.
wrap up in a blanket and get into your hammock and just cocoon, deep rest.
Yes.
For a lot of us coming out of a marriage, our nervous systems are just wrecked, and
Yeah.
our kids as well. So the more we can take time to intentionally heal, and coaching
Yes.
was key for both of us because it helped us
Yep.
slow down during that once a week where we would come and just kind of sort through the thoughts and the
Pour out
feelings.
all the crazy.
Yes, to have a place to do that. And oftentimes after the coaching, I would need to go take a very, very long nap just
Yeah.
to try to integrate. So it doesn't mean you're exhausted coming out of your marriage, so just push really hard. Let's just go girl boss this. Sometimes it's, all right, so now we're just going to go to the essentials, and we're only going to do the essentials. We're going to take off of your plate all of the things that are non-essential so that
Yes.
you have time to heal and to rest and to show up for yourself.
Yes. And that looks so, I want to acknowledge that that's going to look so different for, it's so individual, right?
Yes.
Of like what the next send is for you. The send very well might be like going and working for a company or,
Mm-hmm.
I've had partners who the send are not partners. I've had clients who like, it was actually, starting a life with their affair partner post divorce.
Yeah.
So the biggest takeaway about this like window of change is there is no blueprint like map of how
Mm-hmm.
to do this, which is why the most crucial piece is learning to be with yourself and
Yeah.
hear your inner knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Uh,
And
Because
sometimes it takes space and that quiet and letting go of the idea it has to look like someone else. Because I can guarantee you, you put 10 women in a room post divorce, they may have certain things in common, but there's so many nuances to each
yes.
woman's journey.
Yeah, which is why you can't say, hard and fast. I hate it when people are like, for my journey, it was supportive to really not date immediately, like to not be dating while I was going through the divorce or to not be dating really in a period afterwards. But people who are like, you should really wait like 1 to 2 years post divorce to date people. I cringe at that because I'm like, no, there cannot be, because all it does is for the woman whose journey actually is to like lean into this relationship with this new. I have a client right now who is going through the divorce, and where her journey is a lot of sexual exploration with other partners right now while she's going through the divorce. And I've been amazed to see how much her trusting and following her truth is supporting and enlarging and like speeding up in some ways that process for her in ways that if she didn't have that right now,
Mm-hmm.
it would just be so much harder, which is so surreal, right? That
Mm-hmm.
for her, adding in this piece of dating and exploring while going through the divorce process is actually making all of it more. It's so you have to really individual check in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest piece is understanding that like how that change affects you, what you do with this window, it doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah.
You don't just magically end up with what I'm realizing with what Quinn and I have. Like there was a lot of intentional investment and caring about what was happening and making choices from a like, this is the future I see and most desire kind of
Yeah.
space instead of just how do we get through.
Yeah. And some of it seemed like it was happening from outside sources, such as, decisions that my husband was making that impacted my parenting time or the number of trips to court, things like that.
Yep.
But I could still be intentional in my response to those things, even if I wasn't necessarily choosing for those to happen. I still got to be the
Yes.
co-creator. Yeah. So let's talk about
Absolutely.
sex because repartnering
Your
and
favorite
my
topic.
favorite topic. Let's talk about sex. So I
Mine
found,
too. Mine too.
I know, right? It's this beautiful part of life for some of us. But thinking of this client that you mentioned, this so
Mm-hmm.
I mean I want to say this. I'll just read the quote. So what is
Yes,
that?
read the quote because we're going to talk about the nuance. We're going to get a little bit into the weeds here.
Yeah. Casual sex has a negative effect because an intimate act only underscores loneliness. It is as if the individual were underscoring her loneliness with a magic marker. For both sexes, the single best predictor of happiness and well-being 2 years after a divorce was a new intimate relationship. Often as I watched depressed and lonely adults turning to psychotherapy for help, I thought, if only you could meet someone who loved and appreciated you, that would be the best therapy you could have. And the last sentence of the paragraph above is one that I also want to throw in here. It said, life without sex is bearable for most people. Life without a person who loves and values you rarely is.
Oof.
But I want to point out this client that you were talking about, she
Yep.
doesn't see these acts as intimate acts. Her approach
Yeah,
to her sexual exploration is something different.
it is super intimate for her. And that's where I would say that, like, the casual sex, when you are, because I can use myself as an example, right? Quinn remembers I really didn't play that much for me in my journey with casual sex, but the one time that I did, where I had like met someone, hooked up with them within a couple hours, and then left knowing I was never going to see them again. I remember calling you as I was driving away, being like, that I do not feel good. I don't know what just happened. And it really was that I was coming from a space of pretty deep loneliness and just kind of looking to fill it with a human. And that's what I think when we're talking about casual sex, once again, it's not so much about the action. We talk about this in coaching. It's about what is the thought and feeling that you're coming to the action from. And so in this instance with my client, she is coming from this deeply, she's had some very, like, I would say, spiritual experiences that have, like, that led to her being like, oh my God, I need to get divorced because there is this huge aspect of my personality sexually that is not available to be grown and worked through in my marriage.
Yeah.
And so her leaning into this is actually a deeply, I would say, a deeply intimate relationship with herself.
Yeah, that's what it sounds
like. And the sexual experiences that she's having are more about developing and understanding her own intimacy and what she likes than it is necessarily what I was doing that evening, which was just like, I feel lonely. I need someone to fill this, kind of in an unconscious way, spiraling out and you know, for lack of a better word, just using someone in that moment, using a substance. In this instance, it was a human, to try and get away from my loneliness. And all it did was accentuate the loneliness for me.
Yes. And I think for both of us, ultimately, we did find partners within the first 2 years that we had longer term relationships with that felt really good. And I know that for me, it was one of the most transformative experiences of my life to be with a partner that was, he wasn't everything. Like, he had his own big, beautiful life. And he was okay with me having my own big, beautiful life. He didn't expect me to mother him and take care of him, the things that I was doing for my husband. And so it was beautiful to experience that and to learn that I could fall in love again. I wasn't sure if I could, you know, coming out of the divorce.
Yeah, I remember.
Like, I don't know, you know, I like men.
And you were also very, we kind of talked about this, that sometimes coming out of the divorce in the relationship space, we see so many of you that are like, I just want to be alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we both wanted that. At the very beginning, it was like, desire is completely, that tap is turned off. I just want to feel safe, to be alone. I want to not be harassed. Yes. I want to not have my body be grabbed at and, you know, seen as somebody else's object for their pleasure. So I think the key with this quote is her, you know, when she's talking about wanting, and it's when she talks about it as like, it could be the best therapy you could have. I'm like, oh, my brain goes right back to CPTSD with Pete Walker. And I'm like, yes, he says the same thing in the book of like, when you have a securely attached partner that you can heal with, it is fucking crazy how much more work you can do, how much more healing. I mean, in the last 8 months, Quinn, you've seen me with Joe, like in unbelievable the amount of healing compared to like you've seen all the work I did for those, 4 years previous to that. It has quadrupled in many ways. Now, that isn't to say though, because you and I did have intimate relationships, maybe not with the securest of partners, but partners that were more secure than our marital partners.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is the beauty of like having these experiences too, where like you said, you get to realize, oh, I can love again. Or, with each of my partners, I had a lot of like 3-month relationships that I would say were beautifully intimate, very connected. They were short, but in each of them, I learned more about who I was, what I wanted, and felt an expanding in me and who I saw myself as.
Yes. And I think that this has been a place where having a coach is so helpful, because as you fall in love or watch your desire reset and come home to your own body and your own safety, the falling in love process, it is one of the most intense drugs you can be on, and you go insane. And I remember you falling in love, and you would say, "Come do this, Quinn." And I would be like, "That looks
No.
awful."
It is my drug of choice. We know that.
Yes. But having someone that loves you, that wants the best for you, but is not insane, they can help you see patterns. They can help you question. They can help you slow down. They can help you remain embodied. Because I don't know of anyone coming out of a marriage, whether it's divorce or widow or however a relationship ended, all of us can benefit from introspection and harvesting what we learned from our past relationship and being intentional about how we're going forward, especially when we have children involved, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that was I think one of the greatest things about how, I'm now realizing probably a reason why I was able to so expressively and kind of go big in the dating realm is because I had a coach. I had you there watching my brain, someone to, not just someone who's going to have opinions, but someone who's actually going to be like coaching and helping me find what I'm really looking for.
Yeah, because there were patterns. Like you said, you'd have these 6-week relationships. We're like, okay, let's get curious. And we found out more about the attachment styles and what needs to be healed. And yeah, there's a lot to be gained there.
Yes. Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we talked about, and obviously this piece is very specific to me and Quinn, which is why I really wanted in this relationship section of the podcast to emphasize you have to trust your inner knowing and you have to walk your own path. But for me and Quinn, it did feel really good to, in the 2 years post divorce, we did not introduce our kids to our partners. I'm pretty sure if I did, it was only like it was like when family was in town and they were introduced as a friend like once. So our kids did get a bit of more time and space, at least with us. And in my instance, my ex-husband has not pursued committed relationships or introduced the kids to anybody on that side. And we did both note that we felt that that was helpful. So it doesn't mean that in having a new intimate relationship that needs to also involve bringing them in to your life and your kids or getting married. That's not what this quote is talking about. It's just saying you getting to have a new intimate relationship is seen as being helpful. What was your thought on that, Quinn?
Well, as I saw my husband remarry very quickly, it was so incredibly painful for my children, just the way it happened so quick. 6 weeks after our divorce, a woman that he had met
Oof.
online went and met her in person on Monday. Wednesday, they were married. And so my kids all of a sudden were going to be going back to their
Yeah.
dad's house with a new mom and her kids. And it was just so
Mm.
shocking to their nervous systems. And the kids weren't invited to the wedding. So it was just all of a sudden, dad's married. There's this new woman. And we didn't know her. Having said that, I expected that he would get married. That was not a surprise. Just the way in which he did it was very shocking. And so from that experience, I knew that I definitely did not want to do that to my kids. And I was very careful
Yeah.
about separating my life until this past year is the first time that I introduced my children to someone that I was dating. And my
Yeah.
kids were open to it, but they're very meh about it. They
which
didn't
is
really
which is
care.
a normal, like, can be a normal response. Like,
Yeah.
versus I think it's beautiful that we have that you're sharing that perspective, because we know on the flip side, right? I've been sharing a lot about what it's like to have Joe now in my life with my kids, and to have, I mean, really sweet, sweet moments like the other day of my littlest just popping up on the couch with him and like snuggling up against his arm with his little hand on him.
Yeah.
That's a totally, and it could be definitely like an age level too. It may be just the magic of Joe. I don't know. But
Yeah.
the point is, your journey with what this is going to look like and introducing partners to your kids, for both of us, we really loved taking some space in the beginning to not try to like figure out a dynamic with a partner and our kids at the same time. And
Mm-hmm.
that was huge for me, because I had some of my own trauma in my marriage around parenting in front of a partner. I would say
Yeah.
parenting was like one of the biggest conflict points in my marriage. And I definitely came out, Quinn will know, I was very like, I am never getting married. No one is ever living in my house again. I am never parenting with another adult.
Yeah.
Like, I knew what I knew.
Yeah.
And just the beauty of life, by staying in touch with my inner knowing, by continuing to open. You've coached me this year through life presenting to me like, actually, I think I want Joe to stay. I think I want him to be here when my kids are here. I think I want us all together. And you've coached me through letting go of the old story, right? That a partner
Yeah.
here makes parenting harder,
Yeah.
into the reality of what's actually here, which was, I remember you being like, wait a second. So you're better. The kids are happier when Joe's there, and you don't want him to be staying?
Right? And Joe was better. Like everybody was better when you were
Yes.
together. And yet what was stopping you was simply an old story that
Yes.
had no relevance to what was happening today. It's so important to
Yeah.
see what's the story I'm telling myself.
And it was the old story of there will be judgment and censure from my partner around my parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality was that just was not at all the case.
No. For you,
No.
not at all. And for me, parenting around my partner, I don't know. It's not even a thought.
Yeah, it really isn't. Isn't
Right.
it weird how much we have not had partners who really came in and are like, I need to be the dad. That is not.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No. Joe's approach has been, y'all have something great going on. I'm just happy to be here. Like,
Exactly. Which is exactly what a man should say when they come
Like-
into our homes. Because, yeah, we got this. We got this.
yeah, I think that's really key. And I do want to accentuate that, because I have seen, I'm thinking of an example that I saw of a friend of mine, a little bit younger, and a younger guy coming in and dating her, and his ideas around like, oh, I'm going to come in and, raise her son, the son who hasn't had a father. And
Yeah.
I remember Joe and I kind of being like, ooh, that is worrying how much he is
Mhm.
so focused on his job coming in and being the father presence
Yeah.
without a little more of just, I've loved that in both of our partners, they had a lot of respect for like,
Mm. Yeah.
you are amazing. Your children are so like lucky to have you as their mom.
Yeah.
How can I support you?
Yeah.
I don't need to get all up in y'all's business. What can I do for you?
Yeah. And it wasn't important for me to have my children love my lover. I'm like, he's there to support me.
Mm-hmm.
And he definitely played that role very well. Just really grateful for the way he showed up around my kids, that he didn't make it like he was willing to be involved with them, as like he would go and
Mm-hmm.
play with us or play games, but he's also an introvert. So he's not someone that would,
Same.
intentionally like get in their business or whatever, which I appreciated.
Same. That has been so. Just know that may not be the case for those some others of you. You may want a partner who's more extroverted, but in mine and Quinn's cases, introverted partners who kind of just gently merge into our space instead of needing to assert or control, has worked really well for us.
Yeah.
So I want to shift now from the relationship space into this other space that that I think both of us understand and are super passionate about, especially coming from backgrounds where we were stay-at-home moms, which
Yeah.
is work.
Yeah.
So talking about work post-divorce, if you want to start us off with that quote that we have.
Okay, so this is at the end of a chapter about happiness, and one of the points to remember, she says, work affirms women as much as men. The women who did the best in post-divorce life often entered that life through a door marked work. And I think that that
I
is so important.
And so crazy. Like, I remember the first time I read that because I read this book when I was considering divorce.
Mhm.
And I was like, massive light bulb because being raised Mormon, being told you're going to be a mom, it's going to be so great. I just had severely undervalued what work could do
Mhm.
for me.
Yes, and that quote, like, at the end of your life, you're not going to regret staying at the office. And I'm like,
Uh huh.
when your work is such a part of you that you just want to pour into it when it's aligned with your values, like the work that I do with women post divorce and the work that I'm preparing to do by going to school and becoming a midwife, these are so important to me that if I didn't give it my best, I would regret it on my deathbed. And for you, the
Mm-hmm.
work that you're doing, helping women through this challenging decision, like, yes, that is something in you
Yeah.
that needs to be born and brought forth into the
Yes.
world. It's transformative when our work is aligned with our values. And that's not to say that, like, because I think that work, it doesn't have to be this grand, value driven mission in order for it to be valuable. A woman just
Mm-hmm.
knowing that if she works at the Amazon warehouse, her children will be fed and they will
Yeah.
have medical care. They will have the things that they need. That is
Yeah.
hugely value aligned and valuable. Or if she's taking out student loans and she's like, next 4 years, my kids are in daycare and I'm going back to school and we're going to live on
Mm-hmm.
debt, that's also
Yep.
very value aligned. But whatever your work in the
Yes.
world is, there's so much to be gained by interacting with the world. What has work done
Yes.
for you, Britta?
Oh my God. I mean, work is my area of genius.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
To And I love you defining work through like value aligned work. So at periods of your life, exactly, that work may not mean the work you're doing is, you know, like what Quinn and I are getting to do, where we are creating things that are in line with our values, but working so that you can provide for your children and, you know, make it on your own.
Yeah.
The Amazon warehouse is like a perfect example, is absolutely value aligned, because
Yeah.
that is the work that is allowing you to create the new future for your children that changes the trajectory
Yes.
for all of you. Work, God, I cannot emphasize enough. This has been entirely my experience, that what has made, I would say, even beyond my divorce, like if I had just gotten divorced and not taken this path of, this is what I'm excited about, this is what lights me up, and you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna go start my own business and I'm gonna like bet on me, I don't think I would have the glowing review that I have around divorce.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Because it was not just a divorce for me, it was a complete re-envisioning of myself, who I was going to be in the world, the impact I was going to have in the world. Work became such a place of creation and freedom for me. Really getting to dive deep. I mean, becoming an entrepreneur, especially, I think, was the greatest gift I gave myself, for me and the type of personality I am, because there is so much energy here that wants to go, 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 go. And where I saw that in my mother, she had no outlet for that beyond her children. And so she just constricted and micromanaged the shit out of her kids. It's so beautiful to watch me see those same things in myself. And instead of it becoming this obsessive, controlling energy around my children, to have this whole other world I've created and this whole other outlet that is mine. And I fucking love that my children are growing up knowing, like, my mom has a podcast. My mom has her own job. She has things in the world that she is doing that she's proud of, right? Whether that's, actually, I'm thinking of a client the other day that I coached with like 4 years ago, who I just found out, you know, she just became assistant principal, like was a teacher when we were coaching, and I was like, yay, look at you.
Yes, yes. And tell me about the kind of mother, like looking back 5 years pre-divorce or 6 years, what kind of mother were you when your work was stay-at-home mom compared to the kind of mother that you are when you are doing work in the world?
Yeah. I know there are women out there that like that is their jam, being a stay-at-home mom. That's really fulfilling for them.
Yeah.
I definitely was brainwashed into thinking that. So I really just thought that's what I'll do and I'll be great at it. But it was the mother I was when I was like, that was my only outlet, was being a kept woman at home. It was so stifling. I realize now, my creative side, my brain is so fucking fast. You know, Quinn, it like thinks all the time. And so it was like cannibalizing itself in that environment, because there was not enough there for me. And so now I look at the mother that I am with work, which seems so counterintuitive, right? Because so many of you listening to this, and we wanted to highlight this, you may be thinking right now, oh my God, how am I supposed to like leave my marriage and do something different? I have no energy right now. Yeah. How could I possibly do that? That was me. Yes, Quinn?
Yes. Yes. How
like
possibly? Yeah.
How could I possibly? Like, I look back, I was the most drained I'd ever been in my entire life in the months leading up to, in the like year leading up to my divorce, when I started therapy, all of that. But it's so crazy that in dropping that piece of the marriage to someone that was not an aligned partner for me, looking back, that was not who I needed to heal with. that released so much energy that had once again just been like cannibalizing itself in this relationship that was not working. So I was just being
Yes.
redirected into like psychosis and craziness towards myself from the
Mhm.
pain of wanting connection, striving for intimacy, and just not getting it in the ways I needed.
Yeah.
Not because he was bad or wrong, but just the dynamic of the two of us together.
Yeah.
End the marriage, all of a sudden there's this surge of energy and excitement, probably a lot to do with coaching because I was very forward focused.
Mhm.
And now I find having work in my life, getting to be a mom and have work is the most potently gorgeous, like super wonderful combination for me. I often have days where I'm like, I was absolutely born to be a divorced mom. Like,
Yep.
I remember, like you remember moments where my ex-husband and I, the few times we like got back, had like moments of getting back together and thinking, and by back together, it was never longer than like 2 weeks, y'all, but moments where it was like, maybe we're going to give this another shot.
Uh-huh.
And my hang up every single time was like, but then who's going to watch the kids half the time? Like, no, I can't go back to that. I can't go back to having my children all the time. It's not a fit. And I have to laugh that's just, if I had known myself better, I, may not have even had children at all. That's just the reality of who I am now.
Yeah.
Now that I feel daily grateful that the universe helped me out with, like, you know what? We're going to let her be a mom half the time because she's got some severe trauma from being a parent from the age of like 4.
Yes. Yes. And I found that when I stepped away, so when I was separated, I was no longer living with my husband for a few months before we got divorced. I found that suddenly I had energy that
Mm-hmm.
surprised me because my entire marriage, I just felt so tired. And part of it was just always being on edge because of the intensity of his energy and him being
Yes.
self-employed and go, go, go. And, oh, I've got this new idea and we're going to go all in on it and we're going to risk everything. Oh, and we're going to move to Mexico. And now we're going to move. I mean, it was just a lot.
Oof.
And so to be in a place where I moved into a home and I told my children, we're going to live here until you're all graduated from high school, when we had never lived
Yes.
anywhere that long. And to be able to encourage my children to put down some roots and to relax, there bubbled up within me this energy and this effervescence that I think just comes from living a life of alignment. It reminds me of a client I was working with this week, and she was saying how her life just felt out of alignment. And so we kind of explored. And initially she's like, I don't know why. And I said, but if you had to guess, just give me your
I love
guesses.
I know. I love those brains, and how as a coach, that moment where you're like, okay, we're going to gently coax this
Tell me
brain.
why. And a decision that she felt aligned with just a few weeks ago, she no longer feels aligned with. And
Wow.
when she was able to kind of plug that leak in her energy, suddenly energy flows because energy doesn't come from somewhere out there. We
Mhm.
create energy. We are energetic beings. And when we are in alignment and there's lack of resistance and it can just flow, there can be a lot of energy accessed. And
Yeah, which
it's
is,
just there.
I want to like pause for a second and highlight that what Quinn is talking about is so crucial for those of you considering divorce, because you are like in this moment. It's the whole like stopping the forward momentum of where life is pulling you. You're like, why is it so hard? And often it's hard because you're not moving forward with what is calling you. It
Yeah.
makes me think, this week in the community, we got to do our first coaching call. And on it, one of the women in the community was coaching about this feeling she had that through almost like being a cheetah. And we talked about like this cat being let out of the bag, right? So there was this, cheetah in a bag. That's how she felt in her marriage. And through her, it was through having an affair that she realized like that was when the cheetah got out of the bag. Like, holy shit, I have emotions. I have desires. I have wants. I'm a human. I'm not just a robot.
Yeah.
But being in this really painful space of her brain being like, get the cheetah back in the bag. That like the societal cultural ideas are something has gone wrong because that cheetah needs to be in a bag. And me trying so like wanting to just scream from the rooftops, like, wait a second, why the fuck do we think the cheetah needs to go back in the bag? Like, if we removed her story from this, would we ever think it's humane to keep a cheetah in a bag?
Right.
Like, and so catching the bigger vision of when you follow flow, when you follow where your inner knowing is taking you, you have no idea what kind of energy, or as Quinn said it, like effervescence is gonna fucking show up and help you ride into that next part of your journey.
Yes. You don't know, and many of us don't have enough information. We sit still and say, I want to know which path. But the only way to know which path is to get up off of your fucking ass and start taking some steps forward. And trust that you will know if you are on the wrong path. And there are very few paths that we can't back up and try another path.
Yeah.
But if you will just start giving yourself more information, it doesn't have to be that serious. Talk to an attorney, talk to a therapist, talk to your spouse, have conversations, get more information, but then take action. And that's the best way to get information about what's the next step, by taking a step.
Yes. So I want you to share the quote, this next quote that we have, because I think that's going to be a beautiful like support to this idea of y'all are so caught in this terrifying fear of like paralyzed, just hunker down and protect, when the reality is, share with us this quote, Quinn.
Okay. And this was particularly poignant to me, but it says a substantial number of divorced women, but not men, eventually emerge enhanced by their divorces and are leading more constructive, fulfilling lives than women who remained in unhappy marriages. And I thought the plan of happiness within Mormonism is that you endure to the end. Like this reality, the reality I'm living in, where I am happy, I am safe, my children are cared for. I didn't know that this was even possible.
Yeah. And I really appreciate getting a voice in the mix that is so different from all of those horror stories that we hear, and realizing actually a substantial number of women go on to have lives that feel more aligned, that and what were the things they said specifically? I want you to repeat those, of like what you can expect.
They are leading more constructive, fulfilling lives. And it says eventually. This isn't immediately. They looked at studies across 20 years. But a substantial number of divorced women, but not men. And I thought that was interesting.
I know. It trends.
Marriage is made for men. So even if you are unhappy in your marriage, it's usually still pretty good for the man, I think, usually. But a substantial number of divorced women, but not men, eventually emerge enhanced by their divorces and are leading more constructive, fulfilling lives than women who remained in unhappy marriages.
And this, I mean, I have to say, Quinn, I don't know if we've actually used those statistics on the podcast episode before. We may have to find them and like link them in the show notes. But I know you have talked to me before. Everybody's so obsessed with like statistics post divorce, but that the statistics for women in marriage, tell me the what, like paraphrase what you have told me.
So when a woman gets married, she will lose years of her life. You literally lose years of your life. A man's life goes up, he gains years. A woman's life, she loses years compared to her non-married sisters. You will make less money. He will make more money. You will be more likely to suffer from depression. He will be less likely to suffer from depression.
Like what?
Like everything that is good in a marriage is good for the man in the marriage, the way it is currently constructed.
Yeah, I want to caveat that is when we are saying marriage, we are talking patriarchal, gender rolled marriages that are very much about two people playing very hyper specific gender rolled roles that really do not allow for women to be humans.
And I don't know that that's true. I don't know. I would have to dig more into the statistics because I don't know which marriages they were looking at. And I think that even in non-very specific gendered marriages.
Really, Quinn?
I suspect that just the way women are socialized, even when you feel like you're in an egalitarian marriage, that when a man gets married, he loses like 6 hours of work that he was previously doing, and a woman gains 8 hours of work. And these are an egalitarian relationship.
Wow. So you're saying even, I mean, here I was going to give us the hope that this is just in the extreme patriarchal gender rolled ones. But you're like, I think it actually may extend further across the entire spectrum into egalitarian marriages.
I think so. I think there's still some space for improvement. And that's
absolutely.
And so I don't want to let anybody off the hook for saying that, okay, as long as I am taking out the trash without asking, then everything's good, because it's not necessarily so, you know?
Yes. And you're right. I actually, in thinking about that, I have had clients who do have what would be considered more, not so, in fact, I'm thinking of one client right now specifically where like, in her marriage, they don't have the gender rolled bits, but there are still the vestiges of the patriarchy, especially around like him not doing his own personal work.
Yes.
And her doing a lot of the emotional caretaking of him and the rest of the family. So you're right. You're right.
And I think your point,
it's such a like dismal thought around marriage. I'm like, I don't want to say like marriage sucks entirely, but thank you, Quinn, for being like, I don't know, Britta, I don't know if we can say it doesn't.
I think we need to go in with eyes wide open. Like, we're not doing anyone any favors by not telling our stories and not saying the way it really is. It's like when a friend or a niece or a nephew gets married, I don't know whether to say congratulations or to send my condolences, because it's both.
Yeah.
But to pretend that it's all fairy tale and happy, and yes, it's hard, but you should stick with it when it's stacked in opposition to a woman's health and happiness and well-being. We're not doing our daughters, our sisters, our friends any favors by not looking at simply what is. I don't think we have to paint it negatively. The statistics just show for women it's not a great deal.
Yeah, I think that's what you're showing is it's not even that we have to overemphasize that. We just have to mention these statistics at all. Yeah. I remember when you shared those with me, I was like, I never heard that. Nobody told me I'm going to lose years of my life in a marriage while my husband gains.
I know. I know. But
Okay, we're definitely going to
I love
link
your
these in the show notes.
okay. I love your
Tell me what you're
point.
going to say.
I love your point that one of the ways there's this imbalance is that women are really leaning into self-awareness and doing a lot of generational healing work, and the men
Yes.
using women as their therapists and we as their significant others and wives. That's an unfair burden. They need to be doing their work on themselves. And many of them, as long as we stay in marriages with them, they will
Yes.
never do the work. They just never, ever
Yep.
will.
Yeah. I remember thinking that went right as I was getting divorced, this impression of like, I think this is what both of us need to do our work. And I know it was because I would have continued to play in those codependent roles. I couldn't not.
Yeah.
In the marriage, the way it was set up, he did
Mhm.
not have prescripted parenting time that was enforced because we're divorced. So it could have just continued with like, oh, I'm working too late. Sorry, this or that. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Okay. We're going to have to have another episode where we dive deeper into this. Did you guys all feel that like emerge in that conversation where we were like, oh shit? Or at least I was like, okay, we got a whole other episode where we may have to dive into like, is marriage good at all?
I know.
Okay.
So let's
But for this episode,
the
yes.
long-term effects of divorce on kids, because I grew up with the idea that mom and dad get divorced, it's going to be a shit show for especially the kids.
Their kids.
There's going to be
Yes.
long-term negative impacts.
They're probably all going to end up cocaine addicted on the streets, those children.
Yes, yes. And having all kinds of bad, unsafe sex. That also happens.
Yes.
Okay. So, but this is at the very end of the book. It says about 35 to 80% of adults and children show few serious long-term problems in adjustment following divorce and are functioning within the normal range. Many who have long-term problems after a divorce had problems that preceded the breakup. Moreover, a substantial group of our divorced women and some daughters were actually strengthened by developing new competencies to deal with the pressing demands that followed divorce and life in a single-parent family. And for me, as a mom of 6 daughters, I'm like, yeah, give it to me. I'm going to gamble on being part of that 75 to 80% that has no long-term
Yes.
negative effects and plus actually strengthened. That has been my experience, and I see it in my daughter.
Yeah.
I see it in my sons as well.
Yeah, that quote is just insane. Like in the best of ways and just like, can we all just take a second to step back and realize how much the dialogue around divorce has been driven by entities? We were talking about this, and I just kind of want to pop this in here that you and I were talking about how you're reading this book. It's called, what is it again?
This American Ex-Wife by Liz Lenz. And she gave a little bit of a history. I have the book on the way because I want to look at her sources. And she talked about how in the 80s, as the religious right began to rise within the Republican Party, they really wanted marriage to be the solution for all of the social ills. And you can see it this year when J.D. Vance was questioned about how are you going to deal with childcare? And he's like, grandma.
like what the fuck, man?
Right? Instead of building.
No, not all of us are in these nuclear families.
Right? And not every grandma wants to babysit her grandkids. But anyway.
Also noticing it was not a grandpa comment. Grandparents, no, grandma.
Grandma.
Oh my God.
Grandma can help. And I thought it was interesting how Liz talked about, I think it was in the early 2000s when it was the Bush administration, and there was huge political push. Again, let's keep women in marriages. And I
Yes.
remember taking a class a few years ago in college where they were really pushing marriage is how we get women out of poverty. And I thought, you know what? I think not having babies as an uneducated woman and maybe having other resources available, maybe that's a way that we
Right.
could.
Can you just I'm just over here like dying. Quinn is watching me on the video, like seething at the just obviousness of the agenda
Yeah.
of what I feel are like male centric voices being like, you know what? We know what's going to fix this? We should get women back in the home. That's what we should do. Like, fuck off. And to hear this quote from a female researcher, right, who
Yeah.
did this incredible, like 20-year long study, who says 75 to 80% of children and adults coming out of divorce show few serious long term problems.
Yeah.
And yet we have individuals, I was going to call them idiots, in places of power in our culture, in our government, in our politics, in our
Mm-hmm.
religions that give these blanket ideas that notice I don't hear the same framework for men. You know what men really need to do? They need to stay married. Like it's not the same. And so just trying to help you guys see
Mm-hmm.
a little bit through that like Wizard of Oz illusion
Yeah.
of all the smoke and mirrors making it seem like it's this big thing, and when you pull back the curtain, it's just a little old man
Yeah.
who's scared.
Yeah. What if we had the same message, but for the men? We said, you know what, men, what you really need to do is to become better partners. You need to start doing the emotional work. You need to look at yourself and unwind some of your childhood trauma before you ever have sex with a woman with the intention or any unprotected sex, anything that could result in a
Yes.
child. You need to look at your own childhood. You really need to start carrying your load because right now, where 70% of the divorces are initiated by women, this should
Yep.
tell you something that the women are unhappy, so deeply unhappy. And even in the marriages where the women are choosing to stay, many times, at least with the women that I have talked to, it's for economic reasons. It's not because
Yes.
they really love this person and they really are excited about building a life with them. It's more sunk cost fallacy. Like I've invested so much, I just don't want to start over, which I think is
Yeah.
fair. But let's look at the advice that we would give to men and start giving it to them and to our
Yeah.
sons and to all the men that we love. Because I mean, I
Well,
love men. I want them to thrive. But
yes.
I'm not fucking around. I'm not going to have them in my life if they're not interested in doing their own
In a
work.
in moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's really the heart of these messages about let's go back. The answer is we just need to go back to traditional marriages
Yeah.
or coaches. There are lots of voices like Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Really, it is a hidden message of men need to be more masculine, women need to drop into their feminine,
Yeah.
and that us going back and playing these roles again is just repeating the past. It's just the same thing. And needing an expanded perspective of wholeness in a human, which women are doing. We've talked about that, that like women are rising from that space of being in a power under position,
Yes.
really developing into, as we see, I mean, lots of us have developed into our masculine. We have both our masculine. And now, thankfully, through I think you and I getting divorced, we've been able to soften into more of our feminine.
Mm-hmm.
to feel safe again, to bring that on board, and then finding partners who actually are balanced in their masculine and feminine more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
And
we
so
have found
it's
that for sure.
yes, it's a moving forward into a future where marriage is different. The way we think about partnerships is different.
Mm-hmm.
And just to bring it back to the quote, even without that future though, y'all, this is the stats. Even with the current, you know, way things are, 75 to 80% shows few serious long-term problems. So that is something to really take into account when you are caught in the maelstrom of your mind
Yeah.
at telling you it's going to be so sad for my kids. They're not going to grow up with a two-parent household. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to, have to take their stuff from house to house. That's going to be so traumatic for them.
Yeah.
This the statistics in this case just aren't there when we
Does
get
not
really
support
far
that.
out.
Yes, because if we turn that around to say that only 20 to 25% of all divorces result in serious long-term impact.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to roll the dice.
Exactly. When you said I'm going to gamble,
Out.
I was like, oh my God, are we all seeing this? Like the huge illusion we've been living in on like what the gamble really is.
Yes.
Because you know what? My parents gambled and stayed in the marriage. It fucking
Mhm.
sucked. We're all really fucked up over here from that.
I know, and mine too. At the end of my dad's life, I remember watching he and my mom as they were telling everybody, we love each other, kind of with gritted teeth. That,
Mm.
yeah, they did grow to love each other, but they also hated each other. It was really obvious.
Yeah, it was really.
Mm.
Mm,
Mm. But
mm.
back to the kids, I have this last quote that I think
Yes.
is so beautiful because, of course, as mothers, we worry about wanting the best for our kids. And so this is just a really important reminder. Happy,
Yeah.
competent children can and do develop in all types of nurturant, well functioning families, including divorced, single parent, and remarried families, through the courageous, selfless, and frequently dedicated caregiving of parents. The current narrow focus in the media and some of the clinical literature on the hazards of divorce and remarriage and problems in children whose parents have gone through marital transitions is a disservice to the majority of the individuals who, often with heroic effort, are leading constructive lives. It isn't a matter of whether the glass is half empty or half full. In the long run, after a divorce, the glass is 3/4 full of reasonably happy and competent adults and children who have been resilient in coping with the challenges of divorce.
Like,
Bada
amen.
boom. Yeah.
Thank God for this incredible researcher who dedicated so much
Yes.
of her time into actually going in and finding the nuance and the just utter craziness of it being actually 3/4 full. It's like,
Yes.
Quinn, when you told me, like, it feels like up is down and down is up. And I hope that's where we've kind of led you guys through this episode of realizing through both of these episodes, part one and part two, um, that everything you've been told and all of the hyperbole and the stories, they certain entities have used certain statistics and data to push an agenda and an idea. And what we are asking is that you really question whether that is the best fit for you or whether you are just being used as a cog
Yeah.
in the machine of consumerism, in the machine of humans trying to take big problems and fix them in maybe short-sighted ways
Yeah.
that previously have been very focused on what works well for men.
Yes. Yes. I mean, for thousands of years, ever since the patriarchal traditions have begun to run the world, It is, let's build this world on the backs of women. And
Mm-hmm.
I say no more. It's like the
Yeah.
title of the book that Ayn Rand wrote, Atlas Shrugged. When the weight of the world is on you, like Atlas holding the world, what advice would you give to Atlas? Shrug. Just take that weight off.
Yeah. And that's, I am so like heartened and proud to be part of women doing that in our own lives, and to also be part of this wave of women, you know, really, I feel so many of us just collectively shrugging and being like, no more. I'm not going to stay in a place where I completely lose all of myself and I have no space to really fully become me with these old ideas of it's going to hurt your children, or you're going to destroy everything, which just, I know you all are getting pounded with right now. I have so many clients whose current husbands are just beating them over the head emotionally and verbally with these thoughts.
Yeah.
So I feel really grateful that we have these 2 episodes to speak out in a different way, to say,
Yeah.
just because they say it doesn't mean it's true.
That is the truth. Just because you say it doesn't mean it's true. So, ladies,
just because
say that.
just because lots of men have said it for lots of years still doesn't make it true.
Doesn't make it true. Doesn't make it true. So let's talk about the big deal this week, which was that your community opened, and
Yes.
you have. So I've been in the community to meet the women, to interact with them. And I've got to say, the part that I love the most is that there's this authenticity. Like, they are not pulling any punches about the challenges they're facing.
Or hiding it. They really
Right?
came in with like, I don't have time to
Yes.
not be me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be me here. And I was like, yes, this is what this is for.
Yes. And watching you coach her specifically, she had this huge shift because of her willingness to be vulnerable. And then she reached out to the community and said, thanks for all y'all being there to witness
Witnessing.
that, because it's so powerful to be in this sisterhood of other women who can hold the space and know exactly what you're suffering through. They're like, I got you. I got you. It's so beautiful. And there are these fun
Yeah.
times where, everybody was putting in memes and gifs to represent themselves. And that was fun. Favorite songs that people
Yeah.
were talking about. I mean, I think that this is going to be such a huge service, and not just service, because that just sounds like carpet cleaning. But like something that's got to get done, but just this place to be held. So I just want to congratulate you on creating that community. So when do
Oh.
more people get to come in? I know we're in the testing phase.
Yes, Quinn, thank you for taking a moment to like spotlight just how big this week was for me. It really was so huge to Sorry, I'm just going to get a little emotional just taking in seeing something that had been like an idea and a concept for so long, and it was it was really scary this week. It was the feeling of like, can this really be done? Is it even possible? What's it going to be like once we're actually in it, and to be in it and be like, holy shit, it's so much better than I thought it was going to be. I had really poured so much love into that space, making it magical, making it fun. Yes, more than carpet cleaning, right? Like, I did not want it to feel like just work and no play, because I want to play. I want so much of y'all considering divorce to realize, yes, this is hard, and that is not all that life is.
Yeah.
And so I too loved those moments when we had women on one of our like new member calls, you talking about, having a lover. We were talking about where we would go on like a one-night trip. And Quinn's just diving in on all the details and just the playful irreverence and the feeling like, yeah, this is a group of women who get me and I don't have to pretend. So this first 2 weeks is this beautifully intimate container. We're through the first week now. This next week, which when you guys get the episode, will be in the middle of the second week. And after that, I'm going to take a few days, probably 4 or 5, to make my adjustments to really, get on board the next few pieces going out the next 3 months. And then November 1st is when it will open to the second round. And the second round of individuals that will be coming in are going to be just a list. I'm going to be pulling from a list of women who have either worked with me previously, either done a mini session with me, or who have done 90-minute intensives. And they will be the next round coming in November 1st. I'm going to have a podcast episode dropping before then that's going to talk, or maybe even right around then, that's going to talk more about the process to get into the community. It's not just going to be an open click a link, sign up. There's going to be an interview process. We have an NDA for the community, which is super important to creating this very, like, now that I knew how special it was going to be, but now that I know above and beyond how special it is, there is this deep desire to really take my time with bringing women in and really not that it needs, but yeah, I guess that's the word, protecting and really keeping this space and letting it not have to just grow right away. So it will be done in phases. And the first phase will be November 1st from that list of women that I've actually met and have already kind of had a connection with as the second round. And then gradually, maybe a month out after that, probably in December, at the beginning of December, is when I will open it up to the podcast, to bringing others in from the bigger, greater community. And who knows, I may also decide to wait until January 1st on that. That's the beauty of me getting to take my time. November 1st will for sure be these women in the 90 minutes, but I want to make sure that we just give it time to grow beautifully and kind of organically, letting everybody create those connections without just like everybody jumping in at once. You know how that is when you go to a party with like 100 people and you're like, ah.
Yes. I have loved, there are these message boards where people get to share their experiences, whether it was around religion or affairs or just in general. And having the few people in there right now, I'm getting to know their personalities and seeing them on the calls. It's just a really beautiful place. I can't say enough about it. I just want to keep talking about it, but we've been talking for a while. So.
I know, for over 2 hours. So yes, good things coming in the community. Keep your eyes, your ears open for that as we go forward. Quinn, thank you again for just another beautiful couple of hours of your time and your mind and your beautiful thoughts. I feel deeply proud of both of these episodes. I love every episode that we put out, but these two especially just felt like really important things that so many of you are wanting to hear, needing to hear. So yeah, what a gift.
Yeah, agreed. These are for our
all right, my dear,
as well. I wish we had been there.
Yes.
But we are here for us now, and that's the important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Till next time. Love you all.
Bye.